All right. I am definitely going to be looking up at what slide is next, because I haven't done this talk in years. Hi, everybody. Is it time? Have I started? Yeah, look how young I was. I had very little gray hair. I think this talk is from 2014, so only 8 years ago. But the good news is our brains haven't changed much. 18 years experience. 18, 27, close. I was still a military helicopter pilot. Let's see, where was, it was before 2014 because I was an independent consultant. And I only did that for a year and a half. So, all right, this talk was inspired and pretty much copied from the book Your Brain at Work by David Rock. So, what differentiates humans from pretty much all the other species on the planet is our brains and thumbs, but I'm not talking about thumbs. We're going to be talking about your brain. The prefrontal cortex, the front part of your brain, is where your higher thinking occurs. It's where your system 2, if you've read the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. Do you want me to stop walking back and forth? Is that you? Your system 2, your logic, your deeper thinking happens in the prefrontal cortex. Most of the rest of your brain is where your system 1, where you just get through the day, go to conferences, that type of stuff. That's system 1. So there's a common misconception. How many items can we hold in the forefront of our minds at one time? Does anybody know the answer? 7. That is the answer that was published ages ago, and it's wrong. It is actually, but thank you, Andrew, I appreciate that. It's a very, very common answer, but in reality, the answer is anywhere between 1 and more than 7. I can't remember what the upper limit is, but it depends on the complexity of them and things like that. The study was done, I can't even remember when, it might be on the slide. It was 1956 by George Miller, but he was wrong. You can only hold one thing in your memory at a time without any degradation. So you can only think about one thing at a time, even with our massive brains the size of a planet. And can I get the door? Any Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy fans here? No, apparently not. That was Marvin. Here I am, brain the size of a planet. All right, so if you consider your brain to be a stage at a theater, a stage with actors upon it, but it's a very small stage. The different things that we're trying to hold in focus at any time are the actors on that stage, and we do have some control over which actors come onto the stage, but we also don't have some control. And have you ever been talking with somebody and suddenly a different actor's on the stage and you go, why am I thinking of this person? What's going on? But the person who controls who's on the stage, we're going to call that person the director. It's still you, don't worry, it's not like there's somebody else in there, it's you, but to control what you're thinking about, we're going to call that person the director. And your director can control what actor's on the stage. They have access to, again, with a metaphor, a bunch of rooms with different actors in it, and sometimes your director finds it hard to find the right room to get the actors on the stage, you know, when you can't remember the thing you were supposed to be saying. That's where the director's running around frantically looking for the correct actor to come in. Something that's pretty interesting about the prefrontal cortex is it's power hungry. It really uses a lot of energy when it's engaged. If you've ever been to a talk, perhaps a tutorial yesterday, where you were thoroughly engaged and you were having to think a lot, and then at the end of the day, you were yawning and you were tired, said, I'm going to go have a nap before any evening activities, it's because your prefrontal cortex, when it's going at full tilt, actually uses as much energy as you do when you're running a marathon. Or running, depends on how long it's engaged. If it's engaged for 2.5 hours and you're a great runner, it's the same energy as running a marathon. So, something that's quite important is your brain is at its best in the morning after it's had a rest overnight. And how many of you show up at work and immediately do the mind-numbing thing of the day of opening up your emails and responding to mundane questions and, hey, can you come to this meeting? Yeah, I guess, okay. And all the energy is draining away. So, at the beginning of the day is where you should block off a chunk of time, an hour, hour and a half, of thinking time. And if there's things that you need to have, like, how am I going to test this? Or I really don't understand this architecture, I'm going to need to think about it. Do that at the beginning of the day, because that's where your brain is at its freshest. It's where it can actually comprehend the things the most. And it's also assuming that you've eaten breakfast, which you should. Your glucose levels will be high enough for your brain to work. There are some interesting studies that are mentioned in the book about how at parole boards in the United States with people who have served their time or most of their time and they're looking to get out of jail, and the judges on the parole board committees have a substantially higher no rate just before lunch. So if you ever end up in jail in the US and you have a parole hearing, make sure it's right after lunch or first thing in the morning. If it's just before lunch, you got another 6 months before you get another hearing. All right. Forgot this one. So there was some really interesting studies that were done. So, by the way, Your Brain at Work is a compilation of hundreds of studies that David Rock spent years investigating and collaborating into a single book. And so none of this stuff is just thoughts or theory. It's all from actual studies, none of which I attributed in my talk, because apparently 8 years ago when I created this, the thought of attribution wasn't in my forefront. But David does attribute all of it, so I'm just doing the single attribution, and you can go and read his book. It was 9 years ago? 2013, 9 years ago. Wow, I'm old. So one of the studies that they did was that they asked people to do a single activity, and it was a simple activity like identifying shapes or something like that. And then they had them do it 2 at a time, and they actually did it slower than they would if they'd done them one after another. And then with 3 at a time, they became completely useless. And as it says, the effectiveness of the people to do multitasking really dropped their cognitive level to that of an 8-year-old. So if your boss keeps giving you, oh, you can work on those 3 projects, that's fine, don't worry about it, you can multitask. No, I can't. No one can. Stop making me ineffective. And so if you are in that situation, something that you can do that will help is break up the entire day. So on day 1, I'm on project 1. On day 2, I'm on project 2. And that way you be multitasking less. Another thing that's important is, and I'm sure we've all experienced this, you're going along thinking about something, your director has put certain actors on the stage, and then someone cuts you off, or you're listening to a story, and someone cuts you off, or something happens, there's an accident up ahead, and then you realize that whatever you were thinking about, whatever actors your brain had put on the stage, they're gone. I know I've done this. I've been driving along with my family, the radio on, just going along, and I suddenly realize I'm lost. And if I don't turn the radio off, I just, turn the radio off, I can't think. Because the radio kept going onto the stage when I needed my ability to navigate on the stage. This one is particularly interesting, and actually I remember when I read it, and yes, I read a book. I usually don't read books, I usually listen to books. But yeah, I know, I was shocked too. But Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need, food, shelter, sexual gratification. They're typically level 1, and then it goes up through the multiple levels. But it turns out that social needs, which on Maslow's hierarchy of needs are around the middle, studies have shown, that's a Laurent Bozovitz thing, the leprechauns of software testing. If people are in front of you and they just say studies have shown without quoting the study, they're probably making it up. I promise I'm not. But the studies have shown that being ostracized or not feeling part of a group, feeling like an outsider, is as much of a threat as not having food, not having water. So if you've ever felt, if you just joined a team or you switched to another team, or you're on a team that you really don't get along well with, and you realize that it's making you feel incredibly anxious, incredibly nervous, out of place, it is because lack of feeling part of a group or social ostracization is activating the same neural networks in the brain. So it's important that everybody that you're working with and yourselves have a sense of community, a desire to be related to, and that triggers your brain to generate dopamine, which makes you feel better, and that's awesome. Dopamine is cool. So the absence of any relatedness generates a primary threat, and then the sense of relatedness when you feel or belong to a group. So in 1995, it was discovered that mirror neurons assist in relatedness. What are mirror neurons? I really hope that's this slide. Yes! As I said, it's been a while. They were discovered by that guy, probably Italian. And what happens is the mirror neurons in your brain light up when they see people perform an intentional action. So have you ever noticed you're walking by somebody and you have no idea who they are, but you smile at them and they smile back? That's the mirror neuron. When you see somebody smile, you usually feel like smiling. There are obviously exceptions, like if you're distracted or you're feeling particularly down and not like smiling. But your mirror neurons light up when you see and perform an action and somebody else performs it. So that, again, gives you a feeling of relatedness, which is why often I have a son who's now 24, and he's on the autism spectrum. Very functional. Don't go, oh, that's fine. But when he was younger, he really couldn't relate. He couldn't read facial expressions. He couldn't understand why people were doing things. If I was smiling at him, but I said, "I'm angry with you," he would, "Why are you angry at me?" No, I'm smiling. Anyway, it was a challenge to bring him up. But after reading this book, it became clear that he didn't get the mirror neuron relationship because he didn't understand how it was going. And so that made it a little more difficult for him. But when your mirror neurons do fire, it gives you a sense of relatedness to the people that you're doing. So if you walk past somebody and you smile and they smile, you actually feel a slight connection with that person. I'm not suggesting you should then go and say, "Hey, do you want to be my friend?" I'm just saying that there is a smile gets a smile, triggers appropriate emotions. And actually, have you ever been walking along and feeling just, not necessarily down, but feeling, and someone smiles at you and you smile back and you suddenly feel a little better? Mirror neurons, they're great. When we get into the state, look at this, when communicating remotely. This was back in 2013. Now that we all do it all the time, it removes a lot of the visual cues, and it often causes misinterpretation. You don't get the same body language, you can only see the face, so it actually becomes a little more difficult. And the more removed the communication, so going from in person to Zoom to audio only, to email, to text, to, I guess, just an emoji. The more removed we get, the more difficult it is to get a feeling of relatedness with that communication. So, that leads into this. Losing the feeling of relatedness will stop you from being able to move a person from the foe category to a friend category. When you very, very first meet somebody, thanks in large part to our ancestries, like way, way back, where you're in my clan, you're a friend, I don't know you, you are here to kill me, you are a foe, until they smile or you get a little bit of a relationship with them, then they slowly move out of the foe category into the friend category. And it can be as simple as saying, hi, my name is Paul, I'm from Canada, I was born in the UK, now I live in Florida, I have 2 children, 2 boys, they're in their 20s, and you're thinking, I have 2 boys, or I have children, or I've heard of Florida. All of those things help move the person that you've just met into the friend category from the foe category. And why is that important? Well, the biggest thing is when someone's in the foe category, it uses a different set of brain pathways. So if I'm talking to Hybe, who is a friend, others of you are my friends too, I'm just picking on him because he's in the front row. When Hybe says something to me, it is processed using the same neural pathways in my brain as if I was coming up with the idea or speaking it myself. Meanwhile, I'm not going to say anybody's name, that would be mean. If somebody I don't like is Andre, if Andre Conton said something to me, then it would be, and he volunteered for that, by the way, I just want to point that out. It gets processed by a different set of neural pathways. The mirroring is gone. I cannot process it in the same way as I would as what Hybe was telling me. It's actually being processed like that's not true. So, which is why in the United States, with just 2 political parties, the right and the wrong, the left. That is not true. The left and the wrong? I don't know. That they never, ever see each other on the same route because they're completely and utterly in the foe camp for each other. And so even if they might agree if one of their own party told them, they will not agree if someone on the opposing party tells them. Oxytocin. I meant that instead of dopamine earlier. It's oxytocin that gets released. So when you're with your friends playing the Great Dalmuti, which is a fantastic card game we'll be playing later, oxytocin is released. It makes you feel good. So does dopamine, by the way, but that's not what gets released here. So one thing that makes people happy is the quality and quantity of their social connections. I'm not talking about how many friends you have on Facebook. Yes, it's a connection, but this is actual real connections, not people that you have met once. You get increased happiness and increased health, increased productivity when you feel part of a team. When you have a good social network, it improves your ability to work. If you're lonely, instead of feeling part of a group, you have a threat response. The threat response, fight or flight. I want to get out of this situation. I don't know how to handle it. And again, having friends reduces reactivity to other threats and stresses. It's good. It's good to have friends. If you don't have a friend, come and talk to me after. I'll be your friend. Having friends around helps you expand your brain. And this one is super cool, and why I speak loudly, that's not what it means, but the word loud is up there, by talking out loud and more often. So, if you just read something or just hear something, your brain will take it in. If you repeat it, if you hear yourself saying it, you actually process it twice, once when you speak it and once when you hear yourself speak it. So if there's something you really want to remember, and you're not like on a crowded bus or something, say it out loud again to yourself. It will really help you remember it. There we go. The speed of learning and ability. Oh, look at that. It was even the next spot. Is increased dramatically. So, this is good. This is good. This is what I was hoping would be on here. So, when somebody is in the faux camp, which remember is everybody you've just met by default, you don't interact using the same regions of your brain. You don't feel empathy. I can't even empathize with Andre. He's a triathlete. I don't even know what that means. Okay, I do, but I can't empathize with him, which makes me less smart. By listening to somebody in the faux camp, I can't even process it to the point that I can make sense. I might just dismiss it. Oh, Donald Trump said this. I don't care, that's wrong. So even though it might not be, there's a small chance, then in that case, I am actually being less dumb because it's not going through my normal neural pathways. And, the other thing is, I have to focus more on the interaction. I have to make sure I'm not making a mistake. I'm not exposing myself to a weakness. So I'm trying to multitask. I'm now an 8-year-old. I also inhibit myself from considering their ideas, even if they're right, which I already covered off. So how do I go from foe to friend, or how do you get the people you've met to go from foe to friend? Super easy. A handshake, swapping names, discussing something. Every culture I've ever been in, and I've been in a lot of them, talk about the weather. Just take a few minutes to switch from the automatic foe to friend. So when you first meet somebody, you're on a Zoom call for the first time, don't just jump right into your presentation. They're not listening to you. Spend a minute, introduce yourself, break down that foe barrier, get into their friend category, and you will be substantially more productive. Having dedicated social time. This is especially important right now. My wife just started at a software company as a software tester, even though she's a chiropractor. Long story. They have 2 weekly meetings where the entire team gets together and they just play games over Zoom. They have social interaction. She feels already deeply part of the team, and she's only been working there for 4 weeks. It's a really good, everybody who joins gets a meet and greet welcome half-hour Zoom where everybody has to say something about themselves along a particular category, like what was the last movie you saw, or what's your favorite, I don't know, artist. That would be a hard one. Anyway, you get the idea. And that's it. How, that's not bad. A little early, but not bad. Any questions? I may not be able to answer them, but... Mike is coming.
With the mic.
With Mike.
How about if the foe relationship is deep?
It's very hard to break. And again, just look at American politics. The one thing that appears to have actually finally put a chink in it is the horrific shootings that have happened. Everyone is kind of agreeing that they need to do something, and even Mitch McConnell has agreed that some gun reform is needed, which I honestly never thought I would hear. So it is very, very difficult to break. It honestly often takes a traumatic event or a concerted effort to do it. You can help making it easier if you want to break the foe barrier by making connections with the person who is your foe. So like I might talk to Andre and say, oh, you are a software tester? Okay, there's something in common, and slowly get that person's a jerk to that person's tolerable to actually they're not that bad thing, but it's very hard to break a deep foe relationship.
But do you think, I don't know, it's worth it? For example, let's put it this way, Republican versus Democrat, okay, and trying to convince the other that you're in the wrong and I'm in the right. I mean, does it lead to anything good, or is it just a waste of time?
Honestly, I really hope they can fix it, because as David Rock showed us in the book, that everyone, when they're processing faux responses, is literally dumber than they are otherwise. So the entire United States is being run by 8-year-olds because they're all multitasking as to, is this going to look good on TV? What's that person thinking? What's the reaction going to be to this? So they're all essentially degraded to 8-year-olds, which explains an awful lot when you look at American politics.
Awesome. Next question.
And remember, I'm not an expert. I read a book. Actually, I read it twice, but it was really good. Strongly recommended. Although I gave you all the highlights, so maybe you don't need to. All right, thank you very much. Don't. That was close. Whew.
Can developers and testers be friends?
Can developer and testers be friends? Carmen is a developer and Andre is a tester, and they're friends, I guess, beyond friends. I don't know. They've been together for 10 years. I have a couple of friends who are developers. A couple.
I'm a developer. Do you want to be friends?
No.
Oh. Okay.
I would put the question differently. Why testers and developers wouldn't be friends?
Well, we automatically start out in faux camps, and then without breaking down the barrier and trying to be friends, you're already in the faux camp, and they're going to say things that you're going to say, no, that's not true. You're going to come to them with a bug, being all happy, saying, look, I'm helping you make your work better, and they are going to come back and say, no user would do that, and then you get angry. And there's a lot of contention because legitimately the job of a tester, and if it's not done well, is essentially me saying, you're wrong, here's another example of you being wrong. So you have to, as a tester, be aware that you're continuously pointing out the flaws of the developer. They will continuously argue with you saying, no user would do that, or whatever, it works on my machine, all the other fantastic things they say. But the point is, if you don't put an effort in, you will likely end up hating each other because that's the default.
He's right. I'm sad at least 8 hours a day because of testers telling me my code sucks.
What's my advice on dealing with multitasking issue? Aha! The advice of dealing with a multitasking issue is do it as least as possible. Set aside dedicated periods of time where you're not having to think about multiple things at once. Let project A know that, hey, on Tuesdays, I'm not working on your project. I'm not even going to be looking at your Slack channel. And try to focus your attention as much as you can. Wait. Oh, somebody else. Sorry. You can go ahead.
I have one more question. So maybe somebody's a foe not because they've done something wrong, but because you didn't get to meet them, right? This is what you said, that from beginning somebody's a foe up until you get to know them, right?
Right.
Okay, let's say you switch companies, and in the current situation where everybody works remotely and everything's online, meetings and everything, everybody's a foe to you and you are a foe to everybody.
Correct.
What can you do to not be a foe? I mean, for example, in my case, I've changed jobs sort of recently, and everything's online, everything is business as usual, and that's it. It doesn't get more friendly.
Right, and I'm guessing you also feel a bit of an outsider with your peers.
Yes, and I tend to feel that.
Yeah. So honestly, what my wife's company does is fantastic. And you can suggest to do that. At my previous company, I had suggested that we have a monthly whiskey tasting Zoom meeting. I used to run a whiskey club at work where everyone would come and we would all drink much whiskey. But I missed that interaction, that after work, being with people 2 or 3 times a week, drinking whiskey. So I suggested a monthly whiskey meeting where you'd have to get your own whiskey and you wouldn't get to taste all the other ones, but just suggesting having a social activity, preferably during work time, because it will make you more productive. It is a worthwhile investment. And as my wife's company does, everybody who joins gets to introduce themselves, so they get to move themselves into the friend category by saying, look, I'm a human, I have children, I'm married, I'm not married, whatever, I'm divorced, it doesn't matter. Anything that you say, I can relate to that. I have friends who are in that group. So suggesting welcoming meetings, having weekly social meetings, as my wife's group does, they play games. It works out. If your team doesn't do it as a group, maybe just reach out to somebody who you should be friends with, like a peer, and say, hey, why don't we just get to know each other, a Zoom meeting tomorrow at 9 o'clock, and then spend some time just introducing yourself, getting to know each other, and then you could work your way through the team. Andrew.
Hi. Yep. So a lot of this foe thing, friend-foe, in organisations, you'll see is like set up through the structure of the organisations. So what can organisations do to reduce that while still having an organisational structure?
I wish I knew that answer. That's a great question, but I read a book. I could perhaps making the higher-ups aware of this situation might help. If they're good leaders, they would say, oh, crap, I didn't realize that, and try to fix it. But honestly, I don't know. Your Brain at Work by David Rock. I'll go back to it. No, wrong way. Oh, so close. Oh, there we go. Your Brain at Work by David Rock. Yes?
What if the foe is another tester?
It's probably easier to get them into the friend category unless they're just an irritating, obnoxious jerk. But I still have some friends. But it honestly doesn't really matter who it is. If you have to work with the person, you have to do your best to get them out of the faux camp, or you're going to be an 8-year-old when you deal with that person. So it can...
It becomes a loop.
It becomes a loop, yeah. And it's correct. Once they're no longer a friend, everything they say you can't relate to anymore. You don't feel empathy for them, so you're going to dismiss it, and then they're going to be annoyed because you're dismissing it, and it spirals downwards. And then you have the Democrats and the Republicans in the United States. Yep. Oh, but...
What can you do if the person is an introvert?
I have some introverts who are, some friends who are introverts. It's challenging, but most introverts, I have to be careful with what I'm saying because I'm definitely not a psychological expert, but many of the introverts that I've met with aren't antisocial. It's just exhausting for them to be in groups. So I would suggest, and again, research on your own or talk to a psychologist, but to me, meeting with introverts one-on-one would be a much easier... You're an introvert, he's nodding. He's going to have to have a nap because I pointed him out, sorry about that. Just be aware that some people like me, on a scale of 1 to 100, of 100 being an extrovert, I think I'm a 99. So I'm 100? Okay. I've been promoted one. I get fully energized by doing this, but a very good friend of mine, Elizabeth Zagroba, is an extreme introvert. She stands up here, she'll talk, she looks fantastically comfortable and gives great information, and then you won't see her for like an hour and a half, 2 hours while she goes and sits in a quiet room and reads a book and energizes herself again because she needs the seclusion. And it was actually her advice was to say meet one-on-one and not in a group, because the bigger the group, the more tiring it is for her. So based on what I recall Elizabeth telling me about her situation, I would say just do it one-on-one.
Hi. We've only talked about bringing a foe to the friend camp,
Yep.
What if during work, somebody who has been our friend gets to the enemy zone? What do we do then? How do we solve
If someone puts themselves in the faux camp by just, from my experiences, the quicker you react to it, the easier it is to get them back into the friend camp. Ask them why they did it, let them know whatever they did or you did that has put a wedge in between you. Talk about it, try to break it down and explain it. A few of us lost a good friend, not that he passed away, he just didn't want to talk to us anymore. And it wasn't just me, there was a few of us, and it came from, in almost every situation, a single event, but he was not approachable to say what's going on, and he severed ties with us. It was actually quite sad. It's still something that I regret having happened, but I don't know how to handle it. And it was a misinterpreted email in my case. He said that I had done something on purpose when I hadn't responded to his email that I hadn't seen, but that was it. That put me in the faux camp, and then it didn't matter what I told him. He wouldn't listen to me. So the quicker you can react to it, the quicker you can try to deal with it, the better. And again, as close as you can so that there's no misinterpretation. Don't deal with a misinterpreted email with an email. Deal with it with an in-person or Zoom if you can. All right, thank you very much.
Cool, that's it.